I'd like to ask everyone in the back to just quickly grab a seat, and we'd hope to get started. I'm sorry that we're a little bit behind right now. So my name is Mira Deneen. I'm the Academic Affairs Commissioner for the Alma Mater Society, and on behalf of everyone at the AMS, I'd like to sincerely welcome you and thank you for joining us tonight. This debate is part of an ongoing effort by the AMS to encourage students to get involved in the provincial election. Thank you. Thanks. Our message is that voting is easy and voting is important. So on the easy part, we've, in collaboration with Elections Ontario, managed to get 3 dates of advanced polls happening in the JDEC. That's this building just downstairs, which is really exciting. Students are busy, it's hard to fit in voting, but now you have 3 whole days. So this Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 10 until 8 p.m., 10 a.m. till 8 p.m., you can vote, and just in Lower Cayley outside the AMS offices. And in addition to being easy, voting is important. And voting is important to all of us for very different reasons, and hopefully we'll get into some of those lively topics this evening. So this evening we have invited some of the candidates to join us for a debate, and due to time constraints, I do want to mention that we were only able to invite candidates representing political parties that earned 5% or more of the popular vote in the last election. I encourage all of you to research and get engaged with all of the candidates that are running in this electoral district. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to a lively debate this evening, and I'd like to introduce the candidates. We have Mr. Robert Kiley representing the Green Party. We have Mr. Roger James for the PC Party. We have Mr. Gerritsen, just down there, for the Liberals, and Ms. Mary Rita Holland for the NDP. Thank you, yeah, thank you. So a warm thank you to all of you for being here. And on that note, we should probably get started. So I'm going to introduce our moderator. Our moderator is Dr. Eleanor MacDonald. She's a professor in the Department of Political Studies at Queen's, and an associate dean of graduate studies. And we're very grateful that she's here tonight to be our moderator. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Eleanor MacDonald.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be able to do this. I also wanted to mention, because, are we too close? That the AMS has also prepared an excellent website. On their website, there's some excellent information for, especially for students, but around voting. I want to begin by just explaining the format for tonight's debate. The candidates will begin by making an opening statement, and each of them is given 2 minutes. They had their names drawn out of a hat a few minutes ago to establish the order for their opening statements. After their opening statements, the AMS and the SGPS together have prepared an initial set of questions, and those will be the questions that we use to launch the debate. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question. The order in which they respond will be randomized, so after the question, I'll tell the candidates what the order of their responses will be, and that will change frequently throughout the debate tonight. After we go through the AMS, SGPS prepared questions, then it'll be handed over to the floor for you to ask questions. The rules governing that are that you must come to one of these mics, that you must write down your question in advance, and it will be vetted by somebody, by a student representative at each of the microphones. And the questions, we have criteria that you have to meet in order to have your question put forward. It must be nonpartisan, it must be brief, and it must be directed at all 4 candidates. The only other thing that I think you need to know is that the candidates also are going to be given 3 opportunities during the question period for a rebuttal. So after all 4 candidates have responded to a question, if one of the candidates wants to come back and add something or respond to what one of the other candidates has said, they also have a chance for a rebuttal, and they can do that at 3 points during the evening. At 9:20, we will call it all to a close. I'll probably let you know when the last question is, and then The candidates will each have a chance for a closing statement, and that will be in the reverse order to the opening statements. All right? With no further ado then, I'll call on the first candidate to speak, and that's Mr. Robert Kiley.
Check, check. Well, thank you. Thank you to the AMS for hosting this event, and to the moderator, Professor McDonald, and for you, the audience, for being here. Indeed, we face a unique and challenging time in Ontario. We see an aging population, the ramifications of climate change, continued economic uncertainty, and questions surrounding energy and healthcare, which are very important. I believe that this provincial election presents us with a choice of how we deal with these issues and how we respond. I believe that if we're to ensure Ontario's future success, we must choose a new political path, a path of cooperation and balance. We cannot afford the division and compartmentalization of old political thought. Rather, we ought to adopt a holistic approach, a life cycle approach, a model that factors economic, environmental, and social realities into all considerations when making policy. This model promises to tackle issues systemically in a way that compartmentalized policy cannot. Only this model will allow us to efficiently and creatively work for jobs in the 21st century by spurring local venture capital, investing in education, and changing the way we tax, taxing emissions and pollutants, and not small businesses and incomes. Only a life cycle model allows us to honestly promote clean and affordable energy, saying no to new nuclear and yes to renewables and alternatives. And only this model will work to meaningfully lessen poverty in Kingston and the Islands, and indeed across the province, by an affordable housing mechanism that will invest in local real estate markets. Only when we take seriously the life cycle and the need for balance between people, planet, and profit do I believe that we can move towards greater equity, justice, and success for our province now and in the future. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Mr. Roger James.
Thank you very much. As you'll probably notice by my speaking ability, I'm new to politics. In the last few years, I've been in the financial service business, where I've built a business working with families and individuals. But one thing that has taught me is that Ontario's in trouble. For people that don't realize that, we're in trouble. Ontario is definitely in trouble, and we need change. We need change to bring us out of the funk that we're in. And I mean that because, based on my experience, I've been an independent businessman for over 30 years, the last 12 in the financial service business. And when I look at my family, 5 years ago, my last grandson that was born, when he first opened his eyes, he owed $16,000. Now it's even more. You're going to hear a lot today about what's happened in the past, and what's happened in the past is very, very expensive. And I'm looking at far too many faces here that are going to be picking up the tab. Ontario is not the Ontario that I grew up in. Ontario does not give you the opportunity that I had when, and those my age in the room here had when we started. Ontario is now a have-not province, and we're expecting charity from the rest of the country. And I think that's wrong. This is my first venture into politics, and it's my intention as a progressive conservative candidate, your progressive conservative candidate, to work with Tim Hudak to change it around. We're the only one with a full platform. We're standing by that full platform, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Mr. John Garretson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for holding this debate. This is my fifth provincial election, and I can tell you there are more people in this room today than at all the other all-candidate sessions we've had here at Queen's. So my congratulations to the AMS for holding this, and my congratulations for the people that are involved in the concept of voting is a big deal. Because if there's one thing I want everyone to do in this room, regardless of whether you vote for me or not, vote for me, is that you vote. Too many things going on in the world right now. You look at Syria, you look at Libya and other places where dictators have taken over, and I think the sometimes in this country we take our democracy and democratic responsibilities not seriously enough. I'm a lawyer by profession, practiced in Kingston for 35 years. I was a mayor way back in the 1980s, and I have been in the provincial parliament now for 16 years. I've had the honor and privilege of serving this community, and I've also been a trustee here at Queen's University. So I'm very familiar with the university and with the number of different issues that you face on a day-to-day basis. One of my children went to Queen's, my wife has 3 degrees from Queen's, and I've got 2 degrees from Queen's. Now, I'm just telling you this because, you know, I think party platforms are extremely important. Undoubtedly, we'll get into that in the individual questions. But I think that really what everyone has to ask himself at the end of the day is which candidate of these 4 people, good people, I include myself in that, is the best to represent the interests of Queens, of Kingston, and the islands in the provincial parliament. I believe that I've proved the record in that regard. I've proved the results. We get into that later on. And I believe that I'm the candidate that at the end of the day deserves the support of you on voting day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Mary Rita Holland.
Tuition fees must be frozen. Anything less, and we risk the creep of deregulation and privatization. Student debt must be relieved, or else we are at risk of penalizing low-income students for getting an education. You'll also hear tonight that everything is fine here in Kingston and across the province, especially when it comes to public services. It is my job tonight to tell you that that is not the case. I meet every day with people at the door who are struggling to get by. Many middle-class families cannot make ends meet at the end of the month. People have heard over and over that the government is doing all that it can and that it can't afford to do more. I believe that it is not the job of the MPP to say that we are doing enough and that no more can be done. As MPP, I will listen and I will respond. I will do more.
Hello? Okay. Maybe we're good.
Hello?
Okay.
Okay.
Hello?
So are we?
It's just this one? Chris, is this good now? Is this good now?
Hello? Hello?
Sorry.
Are you reading the question? Who's actually reading the questions?
Test 1, 2, 3. Is there any feedback? Eugene, is that okay? Test 1, 2, 3.
Mike? Yeah, I'm good. All right, the next section of this evening's is the questions that have been prepared in advance by members of the student government at Queen's. So I've been asked to read out the questions, and after I read the question, I will tell the candidates the order in which they are to answer them, and they get 90 seconds each for the response and the option of rebuttal. The first question is, all of the political parties have called for an expansion of student spaces in the province's colleges and universities. Currently, Ontario has the worst student-faculty ratio in the country. How do you propose to increase the quality of education at the same time as more students are being admitted without a corresponding increase in faculty positions? How do your parties propose to employ these graduates? All right, and the order of questioning is Mr. Gerritsen, Mr. James, Ms. Holland, and then Mr. Kiley.
Okay. Hello? Well, first of all, I'm very proud part of a government that has been able to increase the number of positions at colleges and universities by some 60,000 students. As a matter of fact, there are over 200,000 more students in colleges, universities, and apprenticeship programs than 8 years ago. We simply believe, and it's a very fundamental belief, that everyone should be able to reach the maximum of their potential. And it may be in academia, it may be in a college education, or it may be in a good apprenticeship program. That's what our entire program is all about. Now, you know, I hear this all the time, that we spend more on it or less on education than anybody else. There are more students going to college and university here in Ontario because we're by far the biggest province. And you know, the larger the institution is, there are economies of scale involved in that. If you have an institution of 200 or 300 students, there are fixed costs that you have for exactly the same thing. You have a place with 1,000 students. We are doing extremely well. You and I have contributed through our tax dollars $6 billion more to the college and university system today on an ongoing basis than was the case in 2003. We have increased funding to universities and colleges, which I can tell you was a heck of a lot more than happened during the Harris years, when Queen's University, for example, in one given year was given a $20 million cut.
Thank you very much.
That's the fact. That's the reality. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. James.
Thanks, John. Thank you. In our change book, which is changebook.ca, I think you should all have a look at that because we covered in great detail. But one of the primary ways we're going to free up the money to help with education is through reorganization. There's a lot of organizations involved in education, and not all of them are really necessary. That's one thing that we do really seriously want to look at. We're going to free up as well some money. We have $2 billion starting at the bottom level for K-12 education, and then move it up from there. We're concerned about the trustee situation with respect to a number of trustees has grown substantially in the last 8 years, with a number of them, again, that number has grown with those that earn over $100,000 a year. And the input to education does not put the students first, and that's our primary goal, is to put the students first and to give them the best instruction possible with the best tools possible for them to be ready to work in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Holland?
Okay, first of all, I'd just like to clarify something. The question states that all of the parties are in favor of expanding the number of spaces at universities. That is not the case with the New Democratic Party. We're not in favor of expanding the number of spaces because, as I mentioned, we don't have enough funding for the universities. And the fact that we have fixed costs means nothing when we don't have the professors to teach the students. This is why we have the rising size of classes and the rising student to faculty ratio. That is our objective. We need to address those issues if we're going to address quality of education. And one of the ways that we can fund this is by taking some of the administrative costs that we're paying. Currently, the top 29 administrators here at Queen's are making $4.8 million a year. And so there's a lot we can do that doesn't involve simply opening up more spaces and taking more tuition money for students who can't afford their education.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kiley. Mr. Kiley?
So in the Green Party's view, this speaks to the question of funding for university. And we have a novel proposal that would seek to have donors contribute to an endowment fund, which would be marked every year. They could donate a minimum of $5,000, and that would come off their income tax and give them potentially a tax break. And this would have a constant source of funding for universities for the next 20, 30 years, which would allow us to put our money towards funding SHIRC and NSERC and other programs that fund scholars, so professors would be a viable option at universities as much as making sure that students are prioritized. Because when we have smaller class sizes and when we have professors doing high quality research in these institutions, then students will learn the most. So this is a question about funding universities, and we propose an endowment fund. And also we need to talk about our priorities generally in Ontario and where our money is going. And we promote freezing corporate tax rates to make sure that we have healthy public institutions. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, the next question is, over the past 20 years, private sources of funding have grown in importance, both for university budgets as a whole and as a source of financial resources for individual researchers and departments. Private industry undeniably provides an important outlet for university research, especially in the sciences and engineering. What balance should exist between universities as public institutions and as research laboratories for private companies? The order of responses for this question will be Ms. Holland, Mr. Gerritsen, Mr. Kiley, Mr. James. Beginning with Ms. Holland.
Okay, so we're not in favor of allowing any more private influence in the universities. In 1990, 20% of a university's budget was coming from private sources, and now it's up to about 50%. So we're seeing it happen, and there's no doubt that universities are facing tough economic times. However, this is the time to make changes, like I mentioned. Speaking on behalf of the students, I would argue the administration has a lot to do in allowing, in providing a greater source of revenue for the university. The students are not the place to be getting more of these funds. And the problem with private industry being involved, especially in scientific research, is that it influences academic integrity. We can't have McCain's, for example, sponsoring research in biology and expect that the results produced are going to be non-biased and are going to have the right academic integrity. That's our position on this. We would do everything we could to ensure that there were enough public funds available for universities.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Well, thank you very much. I live in the real world, and in the real world, you know, an awful lot of research is done at the university, and an awful lot of research is being done within the private sector. We have a perfect example of that right here in Kingston with the Green Chemistry Centre, a centre that is located by the LCAN, that contains both the university sector and the private sector. $13 million of your tax dollars and mine have been put into that, you know, and they are looking for green solutions to the toxic materials that are being produced on an ongoing basis in the production process. We can talk about cancer research. There has to be a balance. There has to be an accountability. There's no question about it. But to deny the fact that the private sector isn't involved in doing a major portion of the research that you and I depend on for the solutions to our situations, whether they're medical or otherwise, is just denying the real world that's out there. There has to be accountability, and that's where government gets involved. There's no question about it, but I think there can be a perfect partnership between the private sector and the university to find the kind of solutions that you and I and our kids are looking for with respect to health issues and many of the other issues that we face on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kiley.
We take a middle line in the Green Party between the NDP and the Liberals on this. We believe that we need to have research for research's sake. We need to have research for commercialization, yes, especially around green energy and alternative energy, but we need to do so in a way that protects the academic integrity of the institution. So having mechanisms in place which ensure the accountability that Mr. Gerritsen mentioned, yes, but also to go back to the question previous and talk about funding for universities as being a priority in this province. So large multinationals don't come in, like Monsanto, for example, and start to deeply influence the research in a way which makes it less integrity than we would expect. Thank you.
Finally, Mr. James.
I also think Queen's is an excellent example of how academia can use the research to develop and design and then reach out to the private sector for funding and for places to work, for ways to make it work in the economy, and to really reap the benefits of the research that does go on. If you want to call that public funding, I would not agree with companies coming in and asking for that to be done. They have their own research facilities. But I think when we can have students coming in that were interested in developing things in the 21st century, then we can pass it on to industry to take it from there and market it. I think that's the way it should work. Thank you.
We have a rebuttal from Ms. Holland.
Okay. Just in response to Mr. Gerritsen's comment that we need to be in the real world, I think most students are really tired of hearing that. I think we understand very well that we live in the real world. We pay bills, we pay taxes, we pay high rents, we pay high tuition fees. We very much understand what it's like to live in a real world. And I'd also just like to point out that the issue with privatization, with allowing private money to be invested, is an issue of accountability and quality. Who will determine the quality? Samsung? Quality needs to be determined for the best interests of the people, not for the best interests of the business or the best interest for their profits.
Thank you. All right. Before I ask the next question, I've been asked if we could cut the applause between the questions to save time. This is only in the interest of getting more questions and more responses on the floor, so I appreciate very much, and I'm sure the candidates do as well, your enthusiasm, but perhaps we can just save the applause and have a very long applause sometime around 2 hours from now, okay? I'll proceed then with the next question. This question regards international students. International students, the question goes, make irreplaceable contributions to the academic and social fabric of universities, and they enrich the local, provincial, and national economies. What role should the province play in recruiting from the global talent pool? How would you advocate for funds that assist in making universities like Queen's internationally recognized and enviable places in which to conduct research as students and professionals? And the order of questioning this time is Mr. James, Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley, and then Mr. Garrettson.
There's no question that the PC party agrees that we do need foreign students. It's just a matter of who pays for it. And we offer excellent facilities. Queens is just a prime example of the facilities that are available here in Ontario for all students. And if foreign students want to partake or participate in that knowledge and all the tools that we do provide, and then they should be funded on their own. Thank you.
Ms. Holland.
Okay, the international student question is I think, one that is being misrepresented to some extent. The number of international students in Ontario that receive funding, there are about 3,000 OGS scholarships awarded every year, and only 3% of those go to international students. So that's about 90 students across the entire province of Ontario receiving funding for international students. This is not an excessive amount of money that we're paying. There are huge benefits to having international students on campus. We need to ensure that they have the funds to be here. They come to this province, they pay taxes. They need to realize that we value their innovation, we value their presence, that we treat them as any other citizen in this country, that we do not have different policies according to whether someone is born here in Ontario or in Canada or abroad.
Susie, thank you. Mr. Kiley.
The Green Party recognizes the, in many ways, invaluable contribution of immigrants and international students to our academic institutions and to our community at large. We know that differing world perspectives enrich the experience of all undergraduates and graduates alike, and international faculty experience offer that as well. As such, we encourage international students in Ontario post-secondary institutions through grants and scholarships, and we also think that the money that is currently allocated needs to be increased. There's about $30 million in international scholarships at this point, and we need to increase that in proportion with the grants and scholarships that we are proposing for domestic students, and we think that it is a shame that any party would recommend cutting those funds. International students already pay very high fees. They are contributing in very many ways, so we can make this experience here more attractive to them by providing limited but at least some scholarships. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garrettson.
Well, thank you very much. You may recall that this issue came up earlier this year when the Premier basically announced a program of providing some additional funding to some of the international students. I completely agree with Robert and with Mary Rita on this. International students bring a vibrancy, bring a different way of looking at it that you and I and all of the people that go to this university can only benefit from. It was the PC party that basically was dead set against it. Mr. Hudak felt that the money should go to local students here in Ontario. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And, you know, we totally disagree with that. It is a very, almost insignificant portion of the budget. Now, I know you could say, well, everything adds up together, and I totally agree with that. I think international students already pay an extremely high price, and if we can get some of their best minds over here and give them a little bit of help with some of the scholarship money that we have, and hopefully maybe even one or two of them will stay here in due course and contribute to this society like all of you have in one way or another, through your parents, your grandparents, or whatever. We all came from somewhere else. I came from Holland 50 years ago, okay? And what this country has offered me is the best possible education and the highest quality of life. And we should be giving international students the same opportunities that everybody else has had. And the little bit of support that we can give them by the scholarship program was totally lambasted by Mr. Hudak. He was dead set against it. Now, it may be soft-pedaled at this point in time, but that's the reality of the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This will be the last pre-prepared question from the... Oh, sorry, is there a rebuttal? I'm sorry, Mr. Hudak. I mean, not Mr. Hudak, excuse me, Mr. James.
Regardless of how insignificant my friends on the front podium think our money is, it's our money, and we want to invest it in students from Ontario. We want to make OSAP easier to get. We want it. That's in, again, our change book, and it's very, very valuable. Money is money, and Ontario doesn't have a lot of it anymore, and we have to invest it in you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, this will be the last question prepared by the student government. After this, we'll move to questions from the floor. As I said at the beginning, those questions have to be written down briefly, just to be vetted by one of the students. Is there somebody at both mics? Okay, so I'll be alternating recognizing people at the two different microphones. So if you'd like, you could start to, during the answers to this question, begin to formulate your own question and even come up to the mics, okay? So the last question is, the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario has highlighted greater differentiation as a means of bettering quality of education and cutting costs in universities. This strategy, which would significantly restructure our university system, has also been identified by the Liberal Minister of Training, Colleges and Universities, John Milloy, as a step forward. What are your thoughts on differentiation? And the order of responses here will be Mr. Kiley, Mr. Gerritsen, Ms. Holland, and Mr. James.
Am I allowed to ask for a clarification on higher differentiation? Is that with respect to instruction method or funding mechanisms?
With respect to having each, I'm interpreting the question, but I believe it's with respect to having each university identify its areas of greatest strength and having the universities move towards specialization.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And differentiation, therefore, from other universities. So not every university would aim to offer the full roster of courses, programs.
We believe that a liberal arts degree, studying languages, philosophy, politics, history, psychology, is very valuable and something that we want to eventually make accessible for all students. So we promote a freezing of tuition fees immediately and an increased grant and scholarship program to make sure that financial barriers are not there for anyone that has the academic merit to attend university. And what does this have to do with differentiation? It has to do with it in that we want people to have this experience as undergrads at university in a whole multiplicity of topics, not one in particular. And we believe that if universities become too specialized at the undergraduate level, then we miss that opportunity, which in the long run contributes richly to our society through a more productive workforce, more critical thinkers in the marketplace. So we support it for graduate schools if universities have specific departments that want to have that differentiation. In a graduate context, that is something that we're behind, but we are promoting accessible education for all who want it in a liberal arts context for undergraduates. Thank you.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Well, first of all, there's no question that, the more people we have going to colleges and universities, the better it is. And that's why I was very surprised at Mary Rita's comment earlier that she wanted to fix the number of spaces at university and colleges. I don't agree with that. With respect to the question that's being raised here, look, every university can't possibly be involved in every academic sphere. A liberal arts education and science education, obviously for most universities, a necessity, a must, and will continue. But we have specialization right now. Not every university has a school of medicine. Not every university has a law school. Some universities are better known in one area than another area. As we go forward, you've heard Roger talk about the big hole that we have, the $16 billion deficit that we have right now. We do have to start looking at different ways in which we're going to provide the future for the education of our young people. But the most important part is that each and every individual, when they're born in this province, that they should have an equal opportunity to reach the maximum of their potential in a higher education or in an apprenticeship program. That's what we should be striving towards, and that's exactly what we've done as a government over the last 8 years, and that's why we've got 200,000 more students going to university and colleges and apprenticeship programs than was the case 8 years ago.
Ms. Holland.
Okay, just quickly to clarify, I did not say that I was not in favor of ever expanding spaces at universities, simply that it needed to be tied to more funding. We can't simply allow more and more students without funding and for more professors. On greater differentiation, the main problem is that it's unclear how we will measure what the core strengths of an institution is. And frankly, this is a cost reduction measure. It doesn't seem to have any potential to improve quality of education. If we have social sciences who have smaller budgets, and that's the measure, whether the enrollment of the budget is high, then we'll see more and more of the funds going to the sciences, and essentially the decimation of humanities and social sciences is what this is all about. Also, there are a few other issues. If we differentiate and have teaching universities and research universities, we're ignoring the reality that teaching and research go hand in hand. And also the teaching universities, teaching is undervalued. And so these universities will have higher class sizes, lower quality of education, greater use of standardized and streamlined techniques in evaluating students. And finally, there is a problem with access. If we start to differentiate, students who live in the northern communities, Native students, already have major barriers to access education in the southern part of the province. And if we continue to differentiate, then that means that these people are going to have greater barriers because they're going to have to move even farther to go to university.
Thank you. And Mr. James, finally.
Although we're tying it into university education here, I think it really comes down to life experiences too. If you don't look at the whole world when you're studying, even to begin with for the first couple of years, you're really not going to see the whole picture. The fact that you want to specialize after that is entirely up to you, okay? But I do think that you have to have arts and sciences. We have medicine here as well. We're fortunate that way. But I do think that it carries forward into your life in that you can't just be on one road all the time, whether it's in education or in life. One of the strengths of a lot of industries, Ford's a good example, is they cross-train their people so that if they can't do something in one area, they'll have someone else that can step in and do an equally competent job who's done it before. And that's how you should progress with education. You should be exposed to as much of general information as possible before you decide on your specialty. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Kiley has asked for a rebuttal, to use one of his rebuttals.
I just wanted to take the 30 seconds that I have to take this conversation about education outside of the university. We believe that it's very important that we invest in mentorship programs and trades and apprenticeship, because right now only 28% of Ontario high school graduates are going to university. And while universities provide countless opportunities for the people that attend them and are very beneficial for our economy, we need to make sure that the great majority of Ontario high school grads are having opportunities to further their skills after secondary school. I also wanted to mention something that Mr. Gerritsen said. He said equal opportunity. Now, I think that the way that we have equal opportunity is making sure that our grants and scholarships go to low to middle income families and not giving $0.5 billion tax handouts through tuition cuts to families that are earning up to 6 figures. So really making sure that we're wise with our funding.
All right, thank you all. Now we're going to move to questions from the floor. I just want to remind you that the criteria from the outset are the questions must be nonpartisan, they must be directed at all 4 candidates, and they must be brief. That is, the question can't take any longer than 30 seconds to ask. All right. Do we have anybody at either of the mics who's ready? Mark, are you ready down there? All right. Go ahead with your question.
Hi there. My name is Kyle Franz. I'm a teaching fellow in the Department of History. My partner and I moved in about a year ago together, and since then, our HST has gone up and our hydro has increased over 75%. Now, I was wondering if the candidates could tell me how either you could increase the amount of funding that we will get as students to match these increasing costs, or decrease the amount that we're taxed by the provincial government in order to make life livable.
And the
Thank
order,
you.
Sorry. And the order for questioning, for responses here is Mr. Gerritsen, Ms. Holland, Mr. James, and Mr. Kiley.
Well, I assume that you're referring to the platform item that we have, that we will start reducing student tuition by $1,700 or 30% starting on January the 1st, if we should be re-elected as a government on January the 1st. That's a commitment that we've made, and it will happen. It means $1,700 for your on a yearly basis on each one of the and $700 for a college student. With respect to the
for graduate students, master's and PhD, not undergraduate students.
No, we're talking about undergraduate at this point in time. With respect to the HST, you know, sometimes I think that the HST is a provincial, that there was no sales tax beforehand. As you know, and I know, about 85% of the things that you buy on a day-to-day basis, you already paid PST and GST on before, which basically is the HST. If you look at your electricity bill, and I would urge you to do that tonight when you go home, okay, you will see a 10% reduction of the electricity cost through the clean energy benefit, which is in effect more than the 8% provincial portion of the HST on your electricity bill. There's no question electricity is going to cost more. And any party that says up here that it isn't going to cost more in the future isn't looking at it realistically.
Ms. Holland.
Okay, so the NDP wants to take the HST off essentials like home heating, hydro, and gasoline. And we're doing this because, as you mentioned, people simply don't have the money in their budget every month. We've seen those prices rise recently, and the HST has recently been put on top. I've been going door to door for weeks now, and this is what I'm hearing over and over again. People don't have the money. They are now so marginal in their family budgets that they have very little to get by. And that's our job as a government, to make life affordable, and that's what we'll do as an NDP government.
Mr. James?
We are very clear in Changebook that we are going to immediately remove the provincial portion of the HST off of hydro and on home heating costs. When John gave that little mathematical question about your hydro bill, he forgot to mention that the PC party in Changebook is also going to eliminate the debt retirement charge. That is something that was paid off a couple of years ago, and that, when you add it up, is more than the 10% that the Liberals are offering. So the answer is yes, we are prepared to do it immediately. The NDP, I believe, is going to wait till 2014. We, once elected, will eliminate it immediately.
And Mr. Kiley.
In order to make life more affordable, we believe that you have to drop income tax and small business tax to spur the economy and have healthy job creation. And we would do that by instituting a revenue-neutral carbon tax, whereby polluters, so people taking excessive amounts of aggregate, for example, companies that have high emissions would be taxed for their carbon, not consumption, but their carbon production. And that would allow us to drop income tax and small business tax, as I said, and that would help make life more affordable. Also, to speak to graduate students, our funding and scholarship program does include money specifically for grad students. So really shifting how we tax. We don't think that universal sales tax makes sense anymore. We want to be taxing what we don't want to change the market and not what we do want. So that's where we come from with respect to making life more affordable.
A rebuttal from Mr. Gerritsen.
I've got to talk about the debt retirement charge. The debt retirement charge is basically the amount of money that we didn't pay over the last 100 years. And when they say they're going to take it off your bill, it's like saying, okay, you got a $100,000 mortgage, I paid $100,000, and therefore now it's gone. Well, it isn't gone. It's only gone, if you take the interest factors into account, you probably have to pay, I don't know, $200,000, depending upon the interest rate. It is a bogus argument. All it means is that the cost that we're still saddled with by paying too little electricity in days gone by is that somehow the taxpayer is going to pay for it rather than the ratepayer. But you can't just say, poof, I'm not going to cancel, I'm canceling that, it's gone. That's real money that's still owed to people out there in bonds and in various other securities, etc. So this notion about the debt retirement charge, just we're getting rid of it, it's like saying, I owe a debt, hey bank, I'm no longer paying you, it's gone. Nonsense.
All right. Mr. James, as a rebuttal.
It's fine to say that you can ignore a debt, and we're not ignoring it. We have the numbers that it has been paid, and the Liberals are so confident that it has been paid that they're going to extend the payments to 2018. That means we're going to be paying almost double what the original debt was. Thank you.
All right. A question from the southern microphone.
Universities are beginning to acknowledge and some to grapple with academic corruption, falsification of data, false attribution of authority, of authorship, and other forms of scientific misconduct. But many universities aren't because they want to protect their reputations. At some universities, for example at Queen's, some whistleblowers have been punished for bringing forth scientific misconduct. So I want to know what your party would do to make universities accountable, and I would like to know what, if anything, is in your party platform to support whistleblowers who denounce corruption in general.
All right, and the order for responses this time is Mr. James, Mr. Kiley, Mr. Gerritsen, Mr. Holland, or Ms. Holland, excuse me. Mr. James.
We actually have no position on whistleblowers, but I'm sure as an elected MPP, I would be happy to bring it forward because all we hear about whistleblowers is horror stories where they get shamed out of a job or fired from a job, and that's not right. If the government is doing something wrong, the people need to know about it because we are the government.
Mr. Kiley.
Thank you for your question. I think that we need to address some of the reasons why this may be happening, this academic falsification and a lack of academic integrity. And we think that a heavy corporate presence could be one of the causes for this, with research being more and more geared towards commercialization and a need or a perceived need to have it ready for market that can lead to some of this falsification. Now, we're not against corporate donations or research grants within institutions, as I mentioned earlier. We just have to make sure that we have the mechanisms in place to promote accountability. And we don't have an official position on whistleblowing within post-secondary institutions, but we do have a priority on increasing transparency in government in general. And I believe that some of these policies that we have for government could be worked with in the university context as well.
Great. Mr. Gerritsen.
We actually passed within the provincial legislature within the last year and a half, anti-whistleblower legislation. In other words, protecting those people that work within government and its agencies with respect to providing the kind of information that's obviously required. I do not believe currently extends to the university and college sector, but I'm certainly willing to prepare to bring that issue forward. It does apply within the government departments and ministries, but I don't believe it currently applies with respect to universities and colleges, but I'd be more than pleased to take up that issue.
Ms. Holland.
The NDP is in favor of whistleblower protection through legislation at the university level and elsewhere. And this issue also ties in with Bill 183, which was put forward by the NDP MPP Rosario Marchese. And Bill 183 deals with extending the power of the Ontario Ombudsman to the universities. This is something that we need. As many of you are aware, I'm sure, what's happened in recent years at Queen's has been a great deal of many changes put forward by the administration. We've seen classes cut, class sizes grow. We've seen administrative salaries rise. And all of these issues affect the quality of the education. They affect the faculty and the students directly. And therefore, we believe that there needs to be some way to hold the administration accountable, and the Ontario Ombudsman would be our choice.
Okay, thank you very much. From the northern microphone, we have a question.
Hi, my name is Laura Gavrimo. I am a nursing student at St. Lawrence College. One thing I noticed tonight is that women are underrepresented in our political system, as we can see. Essentially, this results in issues that are important to women in Ontario being underrepresented. So what I'd like to know is, what are you and your party going to do to end systematic patriarchy in our political system and to remove barriers to women's participation?
Thank you very much. The order of response will be Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley, Mr. James, Mr. Gerritsen.
Great question. Yes, it's true. Women are underrepresented. There are many reasons for that. There are many barriers for women to become involved in politics. So that would be the first thing that I would like to address. And a lot of those things deal with cultural issues, frankly. But these issues, nevertheless, are something that government has a role in doing something about. We need to ensure that we have family benefits. We need to ensure that parental leave, that fathers are not only encouraged, but as in the Scandinavian model, we have a parental leave system where there's one portion of the leave that must be taken by the father. We need more incentives to encourage men to be at home with families, because currently women, although we still have a generous parental leave system that can be dedicated between both, that's something that men have not been taking advantage of. That's an issue at the federal level, but I would do everything I could, working with my counterpart, to ensure that that was done. Also, the issues that affect women the most, as I said, tend to deal with family. They tend to deal with carrying the burden of the family in terms of the care work that's provided for family members within the home, and also extended family members. So there are a lot of ways that we can relieve those burdens as a government by providing more funds and more resources for people for care in general. And just one last point on that. Okay, I would like to see also that we have a really good look at our government policies. So many of them are quite misleading in terms of their gender-neutral quality.
Thanks. Mr. Kiley.
I think Mary Rita is right that we have to systemically look at issues preventing women from being involved in politics, but of course that applies to corporate life as well as other professional endeavors. So making sure that there are childcare benefits in place that would allow them to take leave from those traditional responsibilities that may be preventing them. Also within our own party, the Green Party, we're committed to fostering a culture of welcomeness and making sure that there are no perceived, cultural barriers within the party that would prevent anyone that is interested. So that's what I'd say to that.
Mr. James.
Having been in industry and also owning my own businesses for the last 30 years, I can say that whenever there was a job to be done, it was best to hire the best person. And male or female, it really didn't matter. You need to hire the best person in order to be successful as a business person, or as a school, or as a university. The important thing is to hire the best person.
And finally, Mr. Gerritsen.
Well, I think in all fairness, all three parties, major parties and the Green Party as well, are trying to get more women candidates. I believe in this election we actually have more women candidates than any other party. I believe there are 41 women candidates out of the 106 or 107 members that we have. We have 8 members in our cabinet of 24, so it's about a third or so. One of the things that I'm really proud of having served in government for the last 8 years, and this isn't meant to be a partisan comment at all, but when I can recall the Harris years, they were all small-town business, gray-haired guys like myself. When I look at the diversity within the last 8 years that we had in the province of Ontario, of people from all sorts of different ethnic backgrounds and whatever, from clear across the world, etc., in our caucus, I'm very proud of that. And I think that that speaks well for the province of Ontario, and I hope that that kind of diversity, whoever gets elected, will continue in this election on October the 6th.
Thank you all. We are also doing a live broadcast and web feed on tonight's event, and there's a question that's come in on Twitter. The question is, what plan, if any, do you have to combat homophobia and queer bullying in Ontario? The order of response here will be Mr. Kiley, Mr. James, Mr. Gerritsen, and Ms. Holland.
Thank you for your question from the Twitterverse. Our policy is not clear on this, but we are clear that we want to be working with community groups and organizations to make sure that all forms of discrimination are combated, and that these organizations who do tremendous work for our communities have the funding in place that they need, whether that's through their post-secondary institution in this context, and ensuring that the funds are there, or through grant programs to the provincial government to ensure that safe spaces are everywhere in this province.
Mr. James.
Thank you. There's 2 points I'd like to make on bullying. First of all, one of our initiatives in Changebook is to do with elementary school teachers, where we want to give them more responsibility in the classroom so they can actually run the classroom and get closer to their students to help prevent the bullying that goes on in everywhere in public life, in particular in elementary school. And the second thing is, I had a form of bullying against me the other day on Mr. Gerritson's Facebook when he accused me of not attending a speech, I guess it was, where I had no intention and I had a conflict of issues. And he raised it as a bullying point on his, apparent bullying point on his webpage. Facebook, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritson.
Well, I don't know, the fact that you weren't at another All Candidates night and I put that thing on my Facebook page, I don't think that's bullying, quite frankly. What is bullying is what takes place in our schools to a much greater extent than ever before. It's kind of interesting, you know, when this measure was raised in the House on a number of different occasions, and the Minister of Education actually came out with some anti-bullying measures in the legislature, etc., the Premier was accused of being Premier Dad. So, you know, you do something and you get blamed for being too intrusive, and you don't do anything and people blame for you not doing anything at all. Bullying in schools is totally unacceptable. And teachers play a role in that. The government, through the Ministry of Education, plays a role in that, in setting out the criteria under which bullying, if it does take place, should be handled within the school system. And that was the whole idea behind the new rules and regulations that came into force. I totally and absolutely support that.
Finally, Ms. Holland.
By extending the powers of the Ontario Ombudsman, we would hope to be able to address any issues of workplace bullying at the university level. Something else that we would like to do is to add the words gender identity into the Human Rights Code, because a great deal of what we're talking about here has to do with people who identify as lesbian, gay, transsexual, transgendered. And so we would also like to pass legislation in schools and in post-secondary education to ensure that that type of discrimination does not continue.
Thank you all. The next question will be from the South microphone.
Norma Graham, Art 63. Dufferin County is being faced with a mega quarry that will destroy prime agricultural farmland. Do you have a position on protecting and preserving prime agricultural land for future generations?
Thank you. And the order for responses, Mr. Gerritson, Mr. James, Ms. Holland, and Mr. Kiley.
Well, one of the proudest moments that I had in government is when the Premier asked me back in 2003 to look after the green belt that is put around the City of Toronto. 1.2 million acres of land have been protected from future development. These are all prime agricultural lands or environmentally sensitive land, and I am very proud of that. I know that as Minister of the Environment, I dealt with a number of quarry applications, and they're extremely difficult to deal with. There obviously has to be an environmental assessment done. During my time as Minister there were some times when we simply turned down some of the quarries. The name of the one quarry just outside of Hamilton that they wanted to build comes to mind right now, that we basically said no to, and that was the end of it. I know there's a big controversy right now with respect to Melancton. I would hope that the environmental assessments take place, and that after they're done, that a good, sound judgment be made of that. Obviously, to protect the tremendous natural resources that we have out there in water and in air. We haven't talked about clean air yet. I hope somebody asks a question about the Green Energy Act and clean air at some point in time in the future, because I'm just dying to answer that one. You know, the wonderful resources that we have out there for you and I to enjoy on a daily basis should be protected at all costs. And sometimes it takes a real strong government to stand up against the development industries. Let me tell you, I've been there and I've done that, and I want to continue doing that after October the 6th.
Ms. Holland.
Okay, the case that you've mentioned is a very clear example of how corporate interests are being put ahead of the public interest. The case where this land was sold to a developer who claimed that they were using it to grow potatoes, as this area is a potato farming area, and then that was not the case. Now it's being developed into a quarry, or it is proposed that it will be developed that way. Our leader, Andrea Horvath, has come out strongly against this. She's been leading the way in terms of trying to stop this from happening. We would be passing further legislation to ensure that prime agricultural land remains used for agricultural purposes. We have a great example here in Kingston at the prison farms. Recently, that farm was taken out of use at the prison. What we would like to see in the province is that farmland, which is prime agricultural land, is put back to use for agricultural purposes. We would like to see the federal government has agreed to lease that land. We would like to see the province take that lease and use the land the way that it should be used to ensure that Kingston has a sustainable food source. Agricultural food revenues account for $34 billion in their annual revenues. So not only would this be good for the environment, it would be very good for the economy.
Mr. Kiley.
Thank you for your question. The Green Party's fifth pillar of our platform for this election is local farms and local food. And one of the primary points in that part of the platform is protecting the alternative land use services and augmenting that program to make sure that farmers are rewarded for being stewards of the earth and making it increasingly difficult for large projects such as the one that you mentioned to go ahead. Also, our carbon tax, or revenue neutral carbon tax that I mentioned, has provisions whereby excessive aggregate extraction would cost much more than it does now to deter these wide-scale processes which actually damage our best land, and that's extremely unfortunate when that happens. So we stand in opposition to the project mentioned and would ensure that that does not go forward, and that other projects, when proposed, would not go forward as well.
Thank you. Mr. James.
A PC government under Tim Hudak will be strong champions for agriculture. We realize the importance of agriculture and to staying as a strong province. We'll also introduce a risk management program for farmers. Again, it's in our change book. You can check it later. We're also interested in protecting the supply management of food processing. We want to encourage every community in Ontario to use local products, and that will help the farm community. And we're also going to encourage families through various incentives to keep family members in the business and to make it easier for family members to join in and to learn to be a farmer. Thank you.
All right. The next question from the north microphone.
Hi, so I'm Claude Tardif with the Fair Vote Canada. And the young people, the audience here, vote more for the smaller parties. So they are the age group with the most wasted votes that don't elect anybody, that are wasted, discarded. And proportional representation, which would have remedied the situation, was voted down 4 years ago when these people were too young to vote by much older people. So what is your party stance on your stance and your party stance on proportional representation?
Thank you. The question will be responded in order. Mr. James, Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley, and then Mr. Gerritsen.
Could I have a clarification on the question, please? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what the question was.
What is your party's, your stance or your party stance on proportional representation?
Yes. I don't have any comments on that. I'm sorry. I can't answer the question. I'd be happy to talk to you later and perhaps understand it a little better. Thank you.
Ms. Holland.
The NDP is in favor of proportional representation for the reasons that you've mentioned. We have a large proportion of the population who are not represented by their elected officials. This has happened time and time again where we have a majority government situation or a government in power with sometimes as little as 40% of the vote. And we don't believe that's the way to go. We would really like to see that change. And we're specifically concerned with strategic voting, which takes place quite a lot. And there's a great deal of fear-mongering out there telling people that their vote is wasted if they're not supporting a party who is a traditional who has held the position for many years. Clearly, we're against that. We think that your vote matters a great deal, and we would like to see people be able to vote their conscience and vote for what they care about and believe in.
Mr. Kiley.
To pick up on Mary Rita's point, I don't think that many people need to be convinced that we have a democratic deficit, not only in Canada, but in Ontario. And the Green Party does advocate for a form of mixed member proportional representation, similar to the one voted on the referendum last election. We think that one, or at least a few of the reasons that it failed had to do with how the ballot was designed, the many words and the inclusion of both French and English on one side of the ballot could have confused people. We think that there was problems with how the campaign was set up and that there wasn't a true dialogue within the province on it. So we think that it may have seen more support, if not passed, if we would have rectified some of those problems. So we will continue to advocate for democratic renewal. And I also want to make the point that we think that true government and involvement in political processes starts at home. And that means your elected representatives should be championing these issues, championing all voices in the community, even when they disagree with their particular position. They can do that through hosting town hall meetings on regular intervals. Every 3 weeks would be my personal proposal, having online forums to make sure that the electorate stays engaged with the processes that the MMP is going through. And we think that that would spur a renewal in democratic values and participation in politics, which we think would have amazing effects for our riding, or electoral district in this case, and for democracy in this province in general.
And finally, Mr. Gerritsen.
Well, I've been in favor of proportional representation for at least the last 40 years. I believe in a true democracy in which the party should get roughly the equivalent of the percentage of votes they get in seats. In other words, you get 35% of the vote out there. Province-wise, you get roughly 35% of the seats through a mixed member model. Not everybody in my party agrees with that, by the way. We did put it on the ballot the last time, and for whatever reason, it didn't pass. I was a great promoter of it at that point in time. The counter-argument has always been we need a strong, stable government. Yeah, that may be so, but I think our democracy is worth a heck of a lot more than that. Undoubtedly, that issue will come up again at some point in time in the future. I don't think there's anything wrong, by the way, with minority government. None whatsoever. It forces parties to work with other parties. There's no such thing as a liberal solution, a Tory solution, or a new democratic solution. At the end of the day, what the people are looking for is the best public policy for the province of Ontario. That's what people want at the end of the day. And they don't care who actually came up with the idea or who came up with the law. I was accused the other day. I said, look, hey, we steal good ideas from any party. Why not? If it's for the good of the people, we should be stealing each other's idea. Because at the end of the day, we get the best public policy. Proportional representation, I'm totally in favor of that. And I'm totally in favor of minority government as well. And, you know, some people in my party may not like it, but that's the way it is. We live in a democracy.
All right. The next question will be from the south microphone.
AJ Kadim, graduate student. One thing students learn is to collaborate. As future MPP, can you tell us how will you ensure to work with others, especially those whom you might disagree with? Thanks.
All right, and the order of response here will be Mr. Kiley, then Mr. Gerritsen, then Ms. Holland, and then Mr. James. Mr. Kiley.
Well, I think that dialogue is the key to collaboration. And I mentioned just a moment ago my ideas of having regular town hall meetings at the MPP's office, which I would propose to be accessible storefront location that's not cloistered in some office building, so people see it regularly as they pass, and it becomes a center where people like to come in and have those conversations. I propose online forums where people can have regular feedback to their representatives and amongst one another to foster that conversation. And I also think that it's worth noting that the Green Party of Ontario is not structured in such a rigid hierarchical form as some of the other parties. We do have a leader, yes, and he provides insight and leadership, of course, and wisdom, but we have that dialogic or that conversational tone to the whole culture of our party, and that's something that I would hope to bring to the community and to Parliament in general. Working with other parties, I think when we hear their concerns and when we hear the reasons why they are against certain policies you may present, we actually can craft more comprehensive policy, and I think that's the ultimate goal of the Green Party, to have that balance and comprehensive policy for the betterment, well, frankly, of us all.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Well, I've staked my entire political career, both municipally and provincially, on trying to work with people. And the day the election is over, I will deal with anybody in my office. It's in the LaSalle Mews. It's on the ground floor. I will talk to anybody, meet with anybody. I don't care whether they voted for one party or another. Once the election is over, you represent everybody. I don't talk about the McGuinty government, the Harper government, any other government. It's our government. After the election, it's our government. And if you don't like it, you can do something about it again in 4 years. And that's the way I've practiced my entire life. Maybe it's my municipal background that makes me do that. You know, when you're mayor, you have to work with other people. You've got to build consensus around issues. And I believe in working consensus around issues in my local community as well. And maybe that's why I've been somewhat successful. I don't know. I don't discriminate against anybody as far as I know. And I will certainly continue to work with anybody, whether they're the property groups, whether they're the developers. I don't care. What's good for this community in the long run, from a jobs viewpoint, from an environmental viewpoint, that's good for all of us. And I think if more of us thought of it that way, rather than being, you know, this, that, or the other thing, I think we'd live in a much, much better world. So I can certainly work with anybody. I don't think there's anybody in town that could possibly say, well, you know, he doesn't want to talk to me or things like that. I don't always agree with what other people have to say, but that's what our system is all about. And, you know, that's why this is such a great meeting
Time's
here.
up.
And I truly mean that. This is a great meeting, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Time's up. Ms. Holland.
Okay, the NDP also has we have quite a history of cooperation and collaboration, and we would continue to do that as government. I would, however, like to just address something that Mr. Gerritsen has said here, that he is always open and available to discuss matters with members of the constituency. This has not been the case to my knowledge. There are people in the audience here tonight who have contacted me and said that they have tried numerous occasions to contact him at his office prior to the election campaign, which I know is a very busy time, and have received no feedback. Again, I would like to just assure you all that if I am elected MPP, when I am elected MPP, I will respond. There is no issue that is too small. There are people who are struggling. They contact our campaign office looking for help, and members of our staff are working on their behalf because they've not gotten the help that they need.
Mr. James.
Go ahead,
Yes.
I'm glad you're all sitting down because for the most part I agree with what John said, only I could have said it in a lot fewer words. And that's where the difference in him being a politician and me not being a politician. But I think it's very important that everybody has an open door policy. That is the truth in the world. In industry, one of my strengths was I could go out under the plant floor and talk to our unionized employees, of which there were thousands. And then I could go into the corporate office and make a presentation on a large pension plan. Those are the things that I'm proud of in my career, that I have been able to listen to people's complaints, if you will, and I've been able to fix them for the most part. So the door will always be open as your MPP for Kingston and the Islands. Thank you.
Mr. Gerritsen, a rebuttal.
Well, Mary Rita, I would like to know who these people are, because you have personally attacked now, as far as I'm concerned, the 3 very competent people that I've got working in my office here. I'm not there all the time. You know, when the House is in session, I'm at Queen's Park from Monday to Thursday. And I've got excellent staff in Kingston here. I've been lauded and applauded for it. I put out a directory each and every year that gets lauded and applauded in the local paper. Yes, to the extent it even did an editorial about it, that the directory was so comprehensive, etc. People may not always like the answer that we give them to issues, which is a totally different thing. There may not be the necessary legislative framework in place, but we try to look after everybody that comes in our office to the best way that we know how. Are all people satisfied when they leave necessarily at the end of the day? Probably not. But can they ever say they haven't had a hearing? That I know for sure is not the case. And if you have those names, I would like to know them, because I will personally contact them to make sure that we dispel any misunderstanding that they may have.
Thank you. Next question from the north microphone.
In certain schools in the Toronto District School Board, Muslim students are allowed time off for a prayer service led by a local imam on school property in its cafeteria. During this service, the children are segregated by sex, with the women sitting at the back and menstruating girls behind them. The Ontario Education Act clearly states that a board shall not permit any person to conduct religious exercises or to provide instruction that includes indoctrination in a particular religion or religious belief in a school. Why is this special group not subject to the Ontario Education Act? And how do you ensure the omission of religion in a public school?
All right, the order of response will be Mr. Gerritsen, Ms. Holland, Mr. James, Mr. Kiley.
Well, that's a tough issue. That is not easy to answer. You know, on the one hand, we want to give teachers and educators a greater say in their schools, as we've already heard from some of the candidates here. And the moment the school does that, as they did in this particular case, they get criticized because now they're against some, another policy that has been out there. Quite frankly, I don't know what the answer is to that. It leads you into the whole separate public school debate. Going back right to Confederation, which is another issue that we can talk about and probably take the next 3 or 4 days talking about as to what should happen there in the long run. We've got to leave some discretion to the local schools as to how they deal with those kind of situations when the predominance of students are from a particular ethnic community. I don't think we've heard the end of that. I don't know what the answer is, but it'll take good, sound judgment and an understanding of the true situation there to come up with some sort of a solution.
Ms. Holland.
I agree mainly with what John has touched on here, that we need to be very cognizant of the fact that cultural expression, religious expression, needs to be supported in our society. How it is dealt with at the schools, I believe, is an issue for the schools or the school boards to deal with. As long as students are not being taught in any sort of indoctrination fashion any certain religious beliefs, I don't really see the issue of practicing one's religion. But again, this is something that I'm sure plays out very differently across schools.
Mr. James.
Once again, our PC platform is very clear that we leave those types of subjects to the school boards and to the various principals. Our platform is to make sure that teachers teach and look after their own classes, and these are some of the things that will happen in schools, and the principals are responsible for controlling those types of things.
Mr. Kiley.
As was stated, this begs to the question of one public institutional system and what that might mean and how religious expression in those institutions would play out. The Green Party, our stance officially is that we want to have a People's Assembly on this matter and have these conversations in particular contexts and particular circumstances to see how they affect all people in that school, because as Mary Rita rightfully said, an expression of religion in the public institution in an appropriate manner and in a non-doctrinatorial manner is important. It allows people to see expression of their faith, which is something that we believe is acceptable, but we want to make sure that it's done so in a way that doesn't jeopardize the safe spaces of school. So that's why a public consultation and People's Assembly is very important on this matter and one similar to it.
Okay, thank you. Question from the south microphone, please. It's on.
Yes, okay. The timing is very fortuitous following the previous question. In the 1980s, the Government of Ontario extended public funding to the separate school system, the Catholic school system in Ontario. This, of course, has created a huge duplication of education resources. Duplicate schools, duplicate cafeteria, duplicate football uniforms, whatever. The Supreme Court, it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that what the Ontario government did was constitutionally permissible, but it was not constitutionally required. In other words, Madam Justice Bertha Wilson said it was a political decision. So the question I have, given the need for efficient and maximum efficient use of education dollars, are you prepared to do one of two things? Either to go back to the previous system and withdraw the public funding of the separate school system, or to amalgamate the two school systems into one and use the money that is saved, divert that to where it's badly needed in post-secondary education.
Okay, and the responses will be Mr. James, Mr. Kiley, Mr. Gerritsen, Ms. Holland. Mr. James?
Sorry. The answer for Mr. Hudak's government is that would not be an issue. We would not go back. We would always go forward, and we would review any new ideas that come up, any new situations. If it applied to the majority of people in Ontario, I think that's the way you have to look at it. And that would be the position. I can't say that is our position right now, but that would be the common sense kind of thing that we would do.
Mr. Kiley.
Thank you for your question. As I just mentioned, the Green Party is committed to having a People's Assembly, a large public dialogue on this topic. We believe that we want to move towards a single system, a public system, but this is in the spirit of dialogue that our party deeply believes in, and in participatory policy, where we don't make such a large decision for the people, but rather we engage them in this topic and acknowledge the complexities. So while we have an inclination towards the efficiencies that you mentioned and see great merit in it, this is not something that we're prepared to prescribe onto the people of Ontario until we have an honest dialogue and hear what they want on this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Gerritsen.
As we well know from the municipal experiences, amalgamations don't necessarily save money. No, we won't revisit this in the immediate future. It's not in our platform, and it's not in our thinking. We think it would be too divisive in the province of Ontario. There is another way to look at it as well, and that is simply this: that by having two competing school systems, it is kind of like, you know, it makes both of them better, because they're both competing with one another to be the best in their particular community. There are ways, and there have been communities, by the way, where the two systems have worked in one school together because of numbers, etc., that may not be there. I would like to see that experimentation take place in the future. I can see some form of amalgamation, quite frankly, taking place at the administrative level. I've talked about it for years. Not everybody in my party necessarily agrees with that, but you know, these are discussion points, etc. But I think that constitutionally, what brought our country together in 1867 was two school systems, one predominantly French Catholic at the time, and the other being predominantly Protestant English at the time. And it's going to take an awful lot to undo that, and I think, quite frankly, it would just cause too much confusion, and not only confusion, but too much havoc in our society at this time.
Finally, Ms. Holland.
At the moment, the NDP has no plans to amalgamate school boards, although we would be in favor of consultation on the issue because there are obviously many different interests at stake here. One thing we would like to see happen in order to address the funding issue is to make it easier for school boards to get money, because it used to be the case prior to the PCs under Harris that school boards had the ability to raise money. And right now, what they're doing is going to the ministry every time that they need more money for investment in schools, et cetera. So we can do better at ensuring that the school boards have the money that they need. And yeah, the other issue, we'll have to wait and see what the people want.
All right, a question from the north mic.
All right. I was wondering, especially in light of a lot of recent issues, what are the views of the candidates on employers being permitted to sponsor disability insurance, then shirk their responsibility and their legal obligation to provide income when it's far too late for the disabled person to get a replacement insurance, and when the disabled person is too weak to fight?
All right, and the responses to this question will be Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley, Mr. James, Mr. Gerritsen.
Okay, I think the question that you're referring to has to do with the situation at Nortel, where employees were entitled to disability benefits and then they didn't receive them. This is an issue that we believe very a very serious one. The way that we would address this is by using the Consumer Protection Act to stop such misrepresentations by the business. We would force employers to honor their disability insurance promises and ensure the protection of people under all circumstances.
Mr. Kiley.
This is an issue where we're in concert with our NDP colleagues, that we'd ensure that corporations and other contracts that have been made are honored for all people, those with disabilities, of course, but for all people.
Mr. James?
Absolutely. The PC government would conform to that particular legislation to make sure that everybody was treated the way it was originally planned.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Yeah, no, but the real issue here is that the way it was originally planned, if Nortel had the money, they would do it, obviously. The issue is that Nortel went through some very big financial problems, and they can't meet all of these obligations. The province has jumped in with respect to most of the recipients of the various pensions that they're no longer getting under, or not to the same extent with Nortel, by guaranteeing a certain amount. There is an issue with respect to those people that were on disability pensions, etc. We're still trying to sort that out. Obviously companies have to follow the plans that they've signed with people. The problem here was they ran out of money. They haven't got enough money to live up to their pension obligations and their disability obligations. So the question then becomes, to what extent does the government jump in to see these people whole? That's the issue here, etc. We've looked after the majority of them with respect to the Pension Benefit Act changes that were supported by all parties in the House. There is still an issue out there with respect to those people that were on a disability pension, and I'm sure that will be worked out in the long run as well.
All right. Question from the South mic.
Hello, thank you very much for coming here this evening, candidates. I was wondering, we've heard a lot of talk about administrative policy for universities, research funding, accountability, but I was wondering at the individual level for post-secondary students, what exactly is your position on tuitions?
All right, questions, order of response is Mr. Kiley, Mr. James, Mr. Gerritsen, and Ms. Holland.
With respect to tuition, we would freeze tuition for this year, and in subsequent years only index it with inflation. We also would augment scholarship and grant programs, and we would ensure that those are targeted for low and middle income families, because we believe that we have to have equity in education, as the Ontario Poverty Reduction Plan says that education is likely the linchpin to combating poverty, and we believe that not only is it personally enriching and has market value to have our populace educated, but it's a very, very important step in the direction to reducing poverty, which is an issue that's important for us provincially, but especially in Kingston and the Islands, something that we're working towards particularly. So freezing tuition and providing grants and scholarships to people in post-secondary education. Let me say again, that also includes trade and mentorship programs. This is more than just a university conversation.
Mr. James.
Grants and scholarships are very important to post-secondary education. There's no question about that. What we are looking at pretty seriously and making some recommendations in Changebook is how OSAP is calculated based on parental income. There seems to be some variance there where you can, in a lot of cases, based on your parents' income, you don't qualify for OSAP. And we would like to, and we're certainly going to look at that to make sure that the people that are qualified to go to university but don't have the money can somehow get through with OSAP regardless of their parental income.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Well, Roger has talked about his change book, and I'll now talk about my Forward Together book. It's not about the past, folks, it's about the forward, it's about the future. Let me just quote from there. Now, for the first time, we're going to support all middle-class Ontario families with a per year 30% across the board post-secondary undergraduate tuition grant. That means every year, Families of 5 out of 6 students will save $1,600 per student to university and $730 per student in college. The one student that won't be helped are those students whose parents make more than $160,000 per year. That's a 30% reduction in your university tuition.
Ms. Holland?
Okay, so the plan that, first I'll just address what John just spoke about in terms of tuition reductions. The proposed Liberal plan is not, it's a grant. It's not guaranteed to reduce your tuition because there's no cap of tuition fees that goes along with that. The NDP wants to cap tuition fees because so long as you're getting this grant, you know, if tuitions are not capped, this could disappear within a year or two. Secondly, this grant is not, it's not accessible to all students. It's only for undergraduate students. It's for undergrads who have 100% course load. If they change their status, they will not receive the grant. It doesn't apply to post-secondary, or sorry, to international, graduate, or professional students. And it doesn't apply to students whose parents earn more than $160,000 a year, but who don't subsidize their child's education. We will offer, as I mentioned, a tuition cap. We're going to freeze fees to ensure that education is somewhat more affordable.
And there's a rebuttal from Mr. Kiley.
I just wanted to speak to Mr. Gerritson's point because I can't help but feel that that's just an election grab promise. We know that in 2007, after McGuinty broke the tax freeze, which is something that he had said he'd work on with students when he did, and make sure that tuition fees stay reasonably priced, that tuition fees the next year went up 8% and then 10% the next year, and they continue to climb. So Mr. Gerritson's plan, or the Liberal government's plan to cut tuition fees now, has no guarantee in the future that they won't continue to go up. This seems to be a one-time thing to kind of frame them as education premier, as McGuinty has called himself, or the education government, when the reality is these are the very people who have been responsible for this massive inflation in tuition fees in the last 5 years. So we need to take a look at this consideration a bit more critically, I believe.
Thank you. Question from the North mic.
We'd all like to think that university and college graduates won't have to work for a minimum wage, but unfortunately that's not always the case. In Kingston, a living wage of $16.29 an hour has been calculated as the amount of money needed for a family of 4 with 2 parents working full-time to pay for basic necessities and reduce financial stress. But if you're single and you're carrying a student loan debt of $50,000 or more, which is not unheard of these days, you'll need to make more than minimum wage to pay it back. Provincially, would you support a living wage that is the indexing of the minimum wage to the actual cost of living in a community? And locally, would you support a living wage for Kingston?
The order of response, Mr. Gerritson, Mr. James, Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley. Mr. Gerritson?
Well, there have been some changes to the Ontario works rates, and there have been increases in the minimum wage from $7.50 to $10.25. But I don't think that governments at all levels, including my own, including the federal governments of all political stripes, have done enough to deal with the poverty situation. We did pass a poverty reduction strategy that was supported by all parties to basically see a reduction in poverty by 25% over the next 5 years. It's an area that I'm very concerned about. I don't like this ever-expanding situation between the haves and the have-nots. It's something that I raise continually within my caucus, within my cabinet. I'll be quite blunt about that. And I wish we could do a lot more, and I hope to have to influence the situation so that we can do a lot more. Because the situation we have right now in Ontario, when we have so many people going to food banks and so many people still in poverty, simply is not acceptable. And it's something that I within myself are struggling with as to what we could be doing more. And I just applaud all of those organizations and agencies, including the ones here at Queen's. I remember being at the sidewalk situation here when all the clubs were out last Friday. that you have some organizations that actually, student organizations that take food from the various excess food situations to people that are, that are needy, etc. And I applaud them, etc. We can be doing a lot more. We should be doing a lot more. And you've got to keep the pressure on people like myself and others to do a lot more. Thank you.
Mr. James.
The answer to this particular situation is jobs. And that's what a Hudak government is determined to do through cleaning up the bureaucracy that is required for somebody to open a new business or to expand their business. The paperwork that's involved, I deal with these people all the time. I have a number of clients that run small businesses, and they just pull their hair out with all the paperwork that's required, both provincially, municipally, and in some cases federally, depend on the business. We need non-government businesses to expand their businesses, and if every single small business in Ontario hired 2 people in the next year, it would eliminate our unemployment. And that's the way that we have to open up the doors to freeing up the paperwork, all the pressure that it is to open a business. So when you graduate and you want to open your own business, it should be very, very easy for you to do that.
Ms. Holland.
The NDP would immediately raise the minimum wage to $11 an hour, and we would also index it to inflation. As you mentioned, it's a very critical situation here in the city. We have very many unemployed and underemployed people. We need to address the housing situation as well. We have the lowest vacancy rate across the province and one of the lowest in the country. That's something that we're committed to doing as the NDP as well. And I'd also just like to address another issue that's relevant here. Student debt is clearly out of hand, as you spoke to. I personally have a student debt of about $60,000. I've been underemployed for many years working as a bartender to try to erase that. And it's a very crushing situation. I can speak to that for sure. One of the things that we are doing immediately that the NDP would like to do is to take the interest off of student debt, off the Ontario portion of student loans. So that would be effective immediately, and it would apply to anyone receiving loans. So there would no longer be interest accruing on your Ontario student loans.
Finally, Mr. Kiley.
As I mentioned previously, the Green Party's position on making life more affordable is dropping taxes on things that we want, like affordable housing programs. I can talk about that specifically in a moment. Also on access to nutritious and local food through supporting local farmers, and through specific programs like the one put forward by the the Canadian Federation of Students to have childcare accessible to individuals attending post-secondary education. And to do that, we tax things that we don't want. Again, like excessive aggregate extraction, through excessive carbon production at the wholesale level, which is very important, not at the retail level, because we want to make sure that we're not passing costs down to customers in new ways. So making life affordable in ways that will benefit the health and well-being of our ridings and province.
Before we proceed with the remaining questions, I just want to say that it's coming up 9 o'clock. We have a commitment to try and end this in the next half hour. So what I'm going to ask is that there be no further questions other than those who are already lined up and who've already submitted their question. And I would also like to ask, if I could, that the candidates make even briefer responses. So rather than having 90 seconds for responses, if we could cut them to 60 seconds, we might be able to get through everybody, or shorter, we might be able to get through the remaining questions. All right, a question from the south mic.
Hello. Hi. So my name is Kian. I'm a member of the Kingston Coalition Against Poverty, and Mr. Gerritsen, to answer your request for who hadn't been allowed an appointment with you, one of our members tried to speak with you about the special diet allowance and the cuts that were being made, which is a life or death matter for a lot of, thousands of Ontarians. And he only got an appointment when he came back with 8 or 10 friends and video cameras. So my question is, what percent, or would you consider redirecting a percentage of your salary to reducing poverty in Kingston?
And the responses will be in this order: Ms. Holland, Mr. Gerritsen, Mr. Kiley, and Mr. James.
Okay, well, I just told you that I've got $60,000 in debt, but under all circumstances, I will commit to contributing as much of my salary as I can to these causes. They mean a great deal to me. I've seen the situation in Kingston, and I would like to do as much as I can, either as MPP or as a resident and an activist in the community.
Mr. Gerritsen.
I've met with KCAP on at least 3 or 4 occasions in the last 2 or 3 years, okay? That's number one. Number two, I think whatever we contribute to our individual causes that we want to support in our community is up to each and every member that is running for office, etc. And no, I'm not willing to publicly commit any particular percentage of my salary to good causes, etc. But I can assure you that if you look at some of the returns that some of the organizations like the United Way put together, etc., you will see my name and my wife's name there quite prominently at times.
Mr. Kiley.
At our last All Candidates debate, I committed to taking a 30% pay deduction and also taking off 30% of office expenditures for the MPP's office. I can do that because I'm single, I don't have any dependents, and I believe that those moves, those gestures, are not tokenistic because I would actually use that to employ a poverty reduction strategist or mediator through the MPP office to work with groups like the one on your shirt, as well as others in small businesses, to have a network and to increase awareness about poverty reduction in the province and particularly in our community. We know that rates of poverty in Kingston are particularly problematic in the North End, and that's something that we would directly work to solve through an affordable housing program where we buy low-cost homes, 10 seconds left, low-cost homes to spur real estate market and also allow people to enter into these homes as quick as they can. And that's something that I'm very interested in having further dialogue about.
Mr. James.
An interesting little addition to Change Book for those that have become cabinet ministers in a HUDAC majority government is should their department fail in their objectives and their goals and their particular discipline, they will have a 5% reduction in their pay. And that money will be directed in various sources. I'm not sure where it will go specifically to your cause, but the answer to your question is what we've always pushed is jobs. We need to get people working. And to get people working, that's going to solve a lot of the poverty issues. And when I stood in line with Robert last Friday on the People Against Poverty, then a vote against poverty, that was really the main discussion on the line, was that we need to get more people working in Kingston, and that will solve a lot of our problems.
All right, question from the north microphone, please. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a rebuttal. Excuse me.
Well, I am very proud of a program called the Eastern Ontario Development Fund, which has funded high-tech jobs to the tune to 7 or 8 different businesses in this community that your tax dollars and mine go to, which is seed money from the provincial government. It is seeded a solar panel company that's being set up here. It is seeded to the Metalcraft downtown, etc., Bombardier, and a number of other organizations as well to come up with the new high-tech solutions. And you know what it does even more than that? It guarantees an additional 200 jobs in this community. Jobs is obviously the #1 issue. We have people working and contributing to our society, including their tax dollars, then we will have the resources necessary to make sure that all the common services that we are looking for in healthcare and education can be funded. So I would like to know why Mr. UDAC would do away with the Eastern Ontario Development Fund, as Mr. Harris did in 1999 with the previous fund. We reinstituted that fund in 2007, and somehow the Tories keep taking that fund out. It creates jobs.
Okay. Question from the north microphone.
When it comes to voting in the Ontario legislature, do you believe your first responsibility to be to your party's policies or the interests of the people in your riding?
And the order of response here is Mr. James, Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley, and then Mr. Gerritsen. Sorry, yes, and then Mr. Gerritsen, yes. Mr. James.
As I said before, I'm not a politician, but as I understand it, it's always good to go along with, once you decide in caucus what you're going to present to the legislature, to be passed into law. I think it's very important that you all be on the same page. I think that's very important to maintain control of what you're trying to accomplish in the legislature. So I guess my answer to you is yes.
Ms. Holland.
NDP MPs and MPPs are allowed to vote their conscience and vote according to their constituents' wishes. They are not. They are allowed to break rank on policy issues. So I would certainly at all times keep the policies that of the party in mind. But also, if there is one that conflicts with my constituents, I would take their input and I would vote according to what was the best interest of my riding.
Mr. Kiley.
I think that depending on the topic, the answer changes a bit, but fundamentally I believe in the principles of relational representation. So where the MPP has a vision that they share with the community that comes obviously from their party policy, that they have that dialogue and conversation that I've mentioned a few times now, so I won't belabor the point. But they also take the concerns and issues of their constituents to their party and have that dialogue within the party to make sure that the policy that they craft reflects those realities. Now, if you were to elect me as MPP, which I encourage you to do, the likelihood is that I'd be 100% of our caucus. So maybe 1 and 2. So look, you can talk to me and I can ensure you that when we have that conversation and when we work through these issues, and my background, just to be clear, is also in leadership training and development, so this is what I've been doing for many years now, and I'm excited and looking forward to the opportunity doing it as a representative, so I'd be happy to talk more after.
Finally, Mr. Gerritsen.
Well, you know, the reality is I've been there for 15 years and I've seen very few members ever cross the party line. That's number one. Number two, you're part of a team. Whether you're in opposition or whether you're in government. You iron out the differences internally. And if there isn't some sort of party cohesion, I mean, sure, if it's a matter of conscience, well, then you should obviously vote your conscience. I've never had that problem in voting the way I have in the House, over the last a number of years. But you're part of a team, and sometimes it's no different than any other organization you belong to. Do you leave your organization the moment you don't agree with a particular decision? It all depends on the extent. And it's exactly the same thing in parties. And anybody that will tell you, other than Robert, who may be a party of one, that they don't adhere to party unity, etc., isn't the real world. I've been there for 16 years. The number of votes where members actually split from their party, I can count on the fingers of one hand. And they were usually with respect to private members' bills. So, there's party unity there. That's the way our parliamentary system works. That you work things out
Mr. Gerritsen,
internally.
that's your time is over.
Thank you.
Gone over your time. Question from the south flank.
Okay, sweet. In 1995, the government of British Columbia passed something called the Voter Initiative and Recall Act, which was kind of a measure of participatory democracy, where things such as voter initiatives, public proposals of referenda, and representative recall were introduced. Do you think a similar system could work in Ontario, and would your party support it?
All right, and the responses will be Mr. Kiley, Mr. Gerritsen, Ms. Holland, and Mr. James. Mr. Kiley?
I think that a similar mechanism could work. We'd have to make sure that there are qualifications in place to give policy time to iron itself out. I'm hesitant to think that an MPP would be recalled immediately if the constituents weren't 100% happy with the immediate or perceived ramifications of a policy. I think that there has to be time for it to work itself out through the system. I do think, however, that on large issues, it's important that there is a base of support, and that's where I think the recall method can be very advantageous to ensure that that is the case.
Mr. Gerritsen.
No, I do not support recall legislation. People have an opportunity to do that every 4 years when they go to the ballot, as you do on October the 6th. And just getting back to the earlier question, vote for your community. We have a community of 120,000 people, and I can assure you that on every issue that's out there, there is a whole variety of opinion out there. So to suggest that, you know, you vote for your community, there is never a unified community view out there. People have different opinions. It's one of the fallacies that every party likes to sort of bring up, you know, you got to vote with your community. I don't know what that means. There's 120 people here right now. You all have different opinions on something. Well, whose opinion am I supposed to vote on in the House? You use the best judgment you know how, and you'd work it out within your party system, etc. And every party at Queen's Park, by the way, wants to do the right thing. We just happen to see the world in a slightly different way.
Ms. Holland.
In light of the fact that we don't have a system of proportional representation, I do believe that it is important to include the concerns of the citizens in our decision-making process. I would be in favor of doing that as best we can through public consultations, and if that did not yield results that were, if there were still a great deal of tension over these results, I would consider, sorry, I lost the word, recall legislation. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. James.
As would I. I think it's important to have everyone's opinion on something. I think it's important to talk things out so that everybody's on the same page, or at least everybody knows how the other one's thinking. But I do agree that we should have that particular vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from the north microphone, please.
Okay, good. My name is Christo Avalise. I'm a graduate student here, and I'm also a representative from the Public Service Alliance of Canada, representing 1,400 TAs and TFs here at the university. And I think the issue is that the universities, not only in Kingston and the colleges, but all over the province, are a vital cog in public services. And I guess my question is what will you and your party, or you with your party, do to ensure that good, quality public sector jobs are protected now and in the future for both perhaps our parents, but also us as future workers?
Thank you. And the order of response, Mr. Gerritsen, Ms. Holland, Mr. James, Mr. Kiley.
Well, this is a public sector town. 1 out of every 2 paychecks in Kingston comes from the public sector, the military, Corrections Canada, big hospital complexes, etc., universities, colleges, etc. I believe in the public sector. I believe there are certain services with respect to healthcare and education that should only be delivered in a public way and that should not ever be privatized, etc. But as to the internal negotiations or discussions that take place, that obviously has to be done in private, and that's how these contracts are negotiated, etc. All I know is that there's $6 billion, that's with a B, $6 billion more going into the university and college system now than happened in 2003. That is a huge amount of money in our overall budget of $100 billion. We are spending a lot of money. Healthcare gets 50%, $50 billion. Primary education gets about $17 billion, and you get close to, I believe, it's $12 or $13 billion in the university and college sector.
Ms. Holland?
We support continued investment in the public service. That is our main objective as the NDP. We are the only party who supports consistent investment in the public sector and believe that these services need to remain public. We would support any union in their decision to strike or bargain. We would be involved in those processes if need be, so long as all parties were bargaining in good faith. And we would also, we have a history of this. We supported Cup W federally. We understand fully that we need these services to remain public. And moreover, if we don't support our striking workers, we have no future for the public sector. That is the way to protect those jobs.
Mr. James.
We also support public sector jobs, but what we don't agree with the public sector jobs is when they're designed as a buffer between government and the actual people that do their work. The best example of that would be the LHINs that have been developed by the Liberals to act as a buffer between the medical profession and the government. and the Department of Health, if you will, in this case. And what that does is that takes money that is designed and is paid in taxes to go to patient care in healthcare, and it doesn't get there. It gets into bureaucracy and administration, and that takes money right off the table for direct patient care, and that is one thing that the Houdet government will eliminate should we be elected.
Finally, Mr. Kiley.
We believe strongly in the public sector as well, and we want to make sure that encroachment or further encroachment of privatization does not happen, particularly in healthcare. But we also want to make sure that we're having a cost-effective public sector. And in our platform, one of our main proposals around budgetary restraints at this time of economic uncertainty is working with the public sector to eliminate the most inefficient 1% of all programming. And that doesn't mean cutting jobs, that's very clear. We will not cut jobs by doing that, but working with senior level bureaucrats to make that efficient. I also think that, kind of along the lines of this question, we need to make sure that we don't easily dichotomize public and private, because we're moving into a more complex economy where partnerships, alliteration 3 is too many, actually can be very effective in many methods of service delivery, but again, really making sure that we guard healthcare as something that remains very public.
All right.
I need a red card.
I'm sorry, we're running out of time, and you've used up your rebuttals. From the south microphone.
Okay. Over the summer, I, as well as other students and community members, participated in the provincially mandated social assistance review. This review is not scheduled to be complete before the election. What is your party's plan with regards to the finding of this review, and do you have any specific ideas about how to improve the social assistance system?
And the order of response will be Mr. James, Mr. Kiley, Mr. Gerritsen, Ms. Holland.
I'm not aware of this particular program nor the timing of it. I'm sure it was set before the election was set. I'm not sure, but there has to be some sort of answer to the question whether it comes out after the election or not, but I'm not aware of the program.
Mr. Kiley?
To be honest, I was also unaware of the program, but I can tell you Green Party policy with social assistance right now is to have a one-time rise in ODSP and Ontario Works housing allowance to make sure that people, and this is particularly relevant in Kingston and the islands, have access to the vital component that is housing. Because we know that with low vacancy rates and higher than average rents, many people are excluded from reliable and safe housing, and that's something that is very detrimental to our economy, to the social fabric that we have in this riding, and again, that obviously applies in the provincial context too, and we'd work with partners like this organization. I'd be happy to talk to you after to hear about the report.
Mr. Gerritsen.
We have been delivering social services and Ontario disability payments in Ontario for 40 years in exactly the same way. Basically, this review is headed up by Francis Lankin, an individual that I have the highest of regard for, former NDP member of the House, together with the former head of the Statistics Canada that was fired by the Tory federal government, etc., to basically take a look at our entire social service system and see how we can bring that into the 21st century. I don't know what the report's going to say at the end of the day. It's due sometime in the new year, I believe next February or March. I have the greatest of regard for the individuals that are involved, and undoubtedly the report that they will come out with, any government would have to adopt, but obviously they have to take a look at it beforehand. The way we've been delivering social services in this province, exactly the kind of issues that you're talking about, so much for housing, so much for this, so much for that, isn't working in the 21st century. That's what they're looking at. I have confidence that they will come up with a report that hopefully the people of Ontario and the government of the day will implement.
Finally, Ms. Holland.
The NDP would like to raise ODSP and Ontario Works and have those benefits indexed to inflation. At the moment, well, I've seen many individuals across the city living in conditions that are, well, very depressing, and many people actually sort of sharing accommodations a lot of people get together who pool their resources, people who are on Ontario Works and ODSP, because that's the only way that they can do this. So of course this speaks to our housing crisis that we've all spoken about a little bit. The Ontario NDP would address that as well. We would supplement housing, the cost of housing. We would encourage municipalities to invest more in building housing. We would also end the clawback to Ontario Works that takes place now for women with families with children, and for those who receive other benefits like the federal benefits for children. And we would, as I mentioned earlier, immediately raise the minimum wage to $11 an hour.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have 3 questions remaining and then the closing statement. So 1 question from the north mic, 1 question from the south mic, and 1 question on Twitter feed. I'll take the question from the north microphone, please.
Hi. What is your party's or your personal stance on gay-straight alliances in Catholic schools? And if elected, how do you plan to enforce ministry equity policy? Thank you.
And the order of questioning here is, or responses here rather, is Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley, Mr. James, and Mr. Gerritsen. Ms. Holland?
Okay, so I'm not sure if I know, there were 2 parts there. I will speak to the Straight Gay Alliance. The NDP would support the formation of Straight Gay Alliances in high schools. We would make sure that students who wanted to organize those groups were able to do so. And was there another part that I'm missing?
How do you plan to enforce ministry equity?
The ministry, sorry?
Ministry equity policy, Ministry of Education, in this regard.
Okay, in this regard.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this point earlier. We want to ensure that we have the words gender identity included in the Human Rights Code.
Okay, Mr. Kiley.
This question again speaks to the complexity of the discussion around having a Catholic board and a public board, and these would be the conversations that would be taking place in our proposed People's Assembly on these issues. At the same time, we are very committed to ensuring that all spaces, public institutions and otherwise in the province are safe. As far as enforcement, that becomes much more difficult. We want to ensure that school boards have the funding that they need to form programs and have the staffing provided to raise awareness about these issues and to foster these safe spaces, but how the government puts its hand in schools and makes sure that happens is something that I don't feel I can adequately address.
Mr. James.
Enforcement is definitely the issues. Being in favor of this program, as always, when you get into tough subjects like this, and you must admit it is a tough subject, that enforcement of any rules or regulations that are put in place will really be the issue to make it work.
Finally, Mr. Gerritsen.
I don't think it's a tough issue at all. Students should be able to form those clubs that they want to form in their high schools. And the administration should be involved, unless they're doing something to the detriment of other students. I have no problem at all in straight gay alliance clubs in schools, etc. I know that there's an issue in Toronto within some of the, I don't think it's got anything to do with the separate or the public school systems either. Students should be able to form their own clubs in school as long as they're not hurting other students, and the administration should stay out of that. That's the kind of country we live in. And all the homophobia that we've sometimes been subjected to for many, many years, etc., we should just do away with, you know, and realize people for what they are. They want to contribute to society, and how they do it and in what kind of arrangements is up to the students themselves, as long as they treat other students with respect and dignity as well.
Okay, question, thank you. A question that came in on Twitter feed will be our second last question, and then our last question from the floor. The question on Twitter feed is, what are your thoughts on the privatizing of the LCBO and the beer store? And this one will be in this order: Mr. Kiley, Mr. James, Mr. Gerritsen, and Ms. Holland.
Who's first?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Kiley first, and then Mr. James.
Our answer is simple. We think that that should remain a public institution that garners tax dollars for Ontario.
Mr. James.
The PC government feels the same, that it should remain a public business.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Oh, this issue's been talked about for a long time. I would not like to see it privatized the night before the Aberdeen Street Party or anything like that. That's for darn sure. Come on, a little bit of humor, folks. I mean, no, I think we've got a pretty good system. One of these days we will see beer and wine in corner stores. It's not part of any platform, etc. But I think that sooner or later, you know, we will come into the 21st century when it comes to our alcohol laws here in the province of Ontario. And by the way, not necessarily everybody in my party agrees with that. But, you know, it's been going on in Europe, you know, for 200 or 300 years, and they're doing quite all right, and their incidence of alcoholism is no larger than our incidence here. It will come, but it's not a major issue out there. The system that we have right now works well, but beer and wine will be sold in stores one day. Not party policy, folks.
Ms. Holland.
We would not be in favor of the privatization of the LCBO. This is a revenue-generating source that we have here in the province, and we are not in favor of any of our public services. There's an example recently at KGH where the food services there was outsourced. That was a revenue-generating cafeteria, and now it's in the hands of a private company who is going to be determining the quality of the food, the menu, the price of the food. Yet another example of how we're letting consumer choice drive not only our economy but our lives. We need to ensure as much as possible that these services are public, and I think this is just a great example of what we can do, how we have the potential to raise public money in this way and put them to good use in our public services.
Okay, and the final question.
For many years, Ontario has had an alarmingly long wait list for autism therapy funding. Children placed on the wait list when they're initially diagnosed with autism often stay on the wait list for several years. And the current benchmarks policy, which was designed to try to make the wait list shorter, has resulted in children being almost arbitrarily removed from therapy while the wait list remains alarmingly long. So what I'm wanting to know is what would you and your party do to ameliorate this situation?
Thank you. And the order of response, Mr. Gerritsen, Mr. James, Ms. Holland, Mr. Kiley.
Well, unfortunately, autism is on the rise. And I know that a substantial amount of increase in funding has gone into that program from a very minimal amount 4 or 5 years ago to a rather large amount right now, and the numbers escapes me right now. But I know that the amount that we're spending is about 20 or 30 times more than we did 4 or 5 years ago. We are giving treatment now to individuals through an ABA system. We've got more people working with autistic kids in schools. It's not an issue that's going to go away soon. And I think that no matter which party gets elected into government, this is an issue that they're going to have to address to a much greater extent. Much has been done, much more needs to be done to help autistic children.
Mr. James.
We have addressed that matter in Change Book, and what we're concerned about is the wait times, and what we want to try and do, and what we're going to recommend and do it through the medical system, is to have earlier recognition for autism and then have more rapid solutions to the problem. I talked at the door recently to a lady with this situation, and it was a matter of years, and her son was actually fully autistic by the time he was 6, and she still hadn't completed all the testing that she was promised.
Ms. Holland.
Okay, we need to make the waitlist times public knowledge. Currently, that's not the case. Parents linger on these wait lists for years. I also spoke to a woman at the door who was very distraught about the fact that she'd waited 2 years to have her child assessed, and in the end went to a private test. So this is something that we need to deal with right away. The Ontario NDP also recognizes the need for greater support in special needs programs in schools, generally speaking. Our policy is inclusion, and we need to do all that we can in investing in those resources, because the teachers at this point are doing all they can. They need more.
And finally, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you for your question. I think that Mary Rita spoke to it directly what I was going to say, that we need to make sure that schools have the services and the support staff that they need to be dealing with autistic children or children with autism. And we also would include this in our review. I mentioned earlier that we'd be reviewing all government programs, make sure that we were streamlining and making them the most efficient. So this would be included in that process.
Thank you all, and I'd like to thank the audience and thank the candidates for making it through a remarkable 34 questions. Now we will return to the candidates so that each of them may make a closing statement, and they'll make those closing statements in the reverse order to their opening statements. So that will be Ms. Holland, then Mr. Gerritsen, then Mr. James, and finally Mr. Kiley.
Okay, so today I wanted to share with you the main thrust of our platform, which is affordability, and that applies to students. We need to ensure that students can afford an education. We'll do this by freezing tuition fees and by taking the interest off the Ontario portion of your student debt. We also need to ensure that there's fairness. Currently, as I mentioned, students who have to get student loans to go to school end up paying quite a bit more than their peers, oftentimes twice as much to get a university education as someone who didn't require that funding. This is an issue that affects these people for the rest of their lives. I'm one of them, as I mentioned. So there are clear differences between our parties. The NDP is the only party that is firmly in favor of continued support for public services and ensuring that public services remain public. The consequences of not doing so is that we will lead to the continued push towards privatization, the continued decline in quality, and essentially leaving decisions that affect us all to the hands of business owners who are basing their decisions on their profits, not on the well-being of us as a society. They say we can't afford to do this. We can't afford any more investment in public services. I say, don't let them tell you it can't be done. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here for the last 2.5 hours. You obviously are interested in what's happening in the province of Ontario, and you're obviously all going to vote, and now tell your friends and neighbours to vote as well. Secondly, I want to thank the AMS and the organisers for organising this. It's really been a very stimulating 2.5 hours. You know, what this election is really all about is what is the future of the province of Ontario going to look like? Right now, you know, we still have smog days in the province of Ontario, although they have been mainly curtailed because of the closure of the coal-fired energy plants, because of the renewable energy that's out there. It is just fantastic to use that power that's out there with solar panels, with wind turbines, with biomass and biogas. That is the way of the future. It creates jobs, it is good for the economy, and it's even better for our environment. You and I are privileged to live in a great country and in a great province. We've got the highest quality of life that one could possibly have. What we've been trying to do as a government is to make sure that that's enhanced in the future. Through better health care services, a brand new cancer center at KGH, a brand new school of medicine here, a brand new hospital for people that are going to, that suffer from complex continuing issues that stay in the hospital for 20 or 30 years. Providence Care is going to be built. We've really benefited from that in this community. At St. Lawrence College, we've got a new green energy sector. We've got a green chemistry center that's funded at Queen's to look for less toxic solutions in the production process. We're all part of that. So what I would simply ask you to once again think of who is the best person, in your opinion, that can represent the people of this community, including Queen's University. This is a great community, one of the best schools that we're possibly in. I have been honored and privileged to represent this community for the last 15 years, and I look forward, with your support, to continuing to do that after October the 6th. Thank you very much.
I also thank you for all hanging in. I know you're all interested, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not a politician yet. I'm not the best speaker in the world, but I am on the team that has talked to tens of thousands of people to form Changebook. Change book, when you look at it, you will see that there's answers to the majority of the questions that were asked here tonight. We're very clear in our position. We're very clear on how we're going to attack the situations to reduce the debt and the deficit. We're very clear on the things that need to be done first, and that is so important to moving forward in Ontario. As a father and a grandfather, I'm very interested in how I'm going to leave Ontario to my family. I'm very interested in your future, and that's why I've come forward to stand as the MPP, or as a PC candidate to become your MPP in Kingston and the Islands. And I thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Kyler.
I need to end my time with you tonight on a topic that has not been mentioned, and I think that has not been mentioned to the detriment of this discussion, and that is the proposal by the current government to have new nuclear builds in Ontario. There's a proposal to have 2 new sites built at Darlington to the tune of $35 billion, and we know that in all nuclear projects in this country, it goes overboard. So we're looking at $35 billion minimum. To the Green Party of Ontario, that makes no sense. We also know that federally, there's a cap on insurance levels for nuclear builds. If you took that cap off, the price would be exponentially more because insurance companies would in fact not insure nuclear. So it's another reason why new nuclear that is, does not make economic sense. We also think that it doesn't make sense socially because the environmental implications of having toxic waste stored in oceans and in ground deposits for future generations is completely irresponsible. And environmentally, also, I talked at the beginning about a life cycle or an ecological perspective that took in balance. A new nuclear build would not do that because when we look at the life cycle, we see that through the mining and extraction of uranium, through the shipment of uranium, through the building and the life course of the facilities, that tremendous amounts of greenhouse gases are produced. So it does not make environmental sense. And then socially, I think there's something to be questioned about what are we doing with this when we know that $35 billion could be invested more into renewables. Yeah, we've scratched the surface with the Green Energy Act. We've scratched the surface, but we can always do more. There are alternative energies which can provide baseload power. I know that's the concern. Where would we get the power? Through interprovincial hydro transfers, through compressed air storage, as an example, as something that the Princeton Institute of Energy Research has endorsed. We can make baseline, and we can do so in an environmentally, socially, and economically sensible way, and that's what the Green Party is fundamentally about.
Okay, our debate has come to a close for this evening. Again, I'd like to thank the organizers, who I think did a tremendous job of organizing. I'd like to thank the audience, and I'd like you to join me in a final round of applause for our candidates.
Hello? Hi, before you all leave, sorry, just to echo what Dr. McDonald was saying, on behalf of the Alma Mater Society, I'd like to thank you for being here. Thank you to the candidates for participating in an on-campus debate. Not everyone here is a Queen's student, but we definitely appreciate the gesture that you're interested in engaging with students, and that post-secondary education and the many other issues that affect us all as students are on your minds as well. I'd like to thank Dr. McDonald for taking time out of your very busy schedule. Thank you so, so much. Yes. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the Journal for being here. Shout out to the back. And also to Queen's TV. The Journal is live blogging this, and Queen's TV is live streaming it. I know my mom is live streaming this from out of town, so hello. And finally, finally, I'd like to thank all of my wonderful volunteers who have helped make this happen. There's a lot of people wearing these shirts, people who aren't wearing these shirts. As I mentioned at the beginning, this debate is part of an ongoing initiative by the AMS to engage with students. You'll be seeing us all week. We'll be pestering you and handing out bookmarks and following you until you take one. So, and just as a final reminder, advanced polls are in this building on the lower floor on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday this week 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. I'm going to assume that many of you are here because you are interested, because you are engaged. So to the students in the audience, I would like to suggest when you're going to vote, grab a friend, grab a housemate, grab a classmate, say, hey, I'm going to go vote in the JDUC. It's super easy and I can tell you how, with enthusiasm. Because a lot of students might not vote because they don't know how, they think it's overwhelming, they think it's hard. It's not. Voting is easy and voting is important. Thank you for being here, and I hope you continue to stay engaged throughout this election. So thank you.